Failing an exam is not the end of the world, so don't sit there and try and figure out an answer or stress over it for 30 minutes, because that's just going to throw you off your whole game. So let's get started. Oh, that was close. Hello, I'm Sunny, and I'm your host, and welcome to Someone Else's Cloud, a video podcast about Microsoft Azure where we discuss cloud computing, all things DevOps, and my experiences as a consultant in cloud engineering. This is episode 1, and today we'll be talking about the AZ-103 Azure Administrator exam by Microsoft. Today I'll share with you my process, the study materials I used, how I built my lab, and tips along the way, followed by my thoughts on the new exam, AZ-104. So let's get started. Okay, so a little bit about me. So I have been in the IT industry for probably close to 20 years now. I started on the help desk, moved up to sysadmin, and then moved up to systems engineering, then platform engineering, and just a jack of all trades. And now I'm focusing heavily on cloud. Basically, I guess I'm trying to adopt this new mindset of DevOps. Trying to move towards a more agile world, more code as infrastructure, more automation, and I guess better practices with CI/CDs. So it's interesting times at the moment. I've had about probably 1.5 or so years across hands-on experience with Azure at the moment. I've sort of been a bit of a jack of all trades though, so my skill sets in Azure are actually quite diverse, just from my curious nature, I guess. So I sort of know more than just basic admin. So how I prepared for the exams. So I used the Cloud Guru videos. They're available through work, so I had access to them and I just used the content. I had the Scott Duffy videos, but I decided to just try the Cloud Guru ones, and then I liked the structure, so I just stuck with it. I used WizLab test exams. I found them to be beneficial to help get your mindset, I guess, into doing exams, reading questions, multiple choice answers and things like that, as well as gauge your knowledge gaps. I found that really beneficial when I would go through my wrong answers, and basically the WizLab's website would actually give you links as well and refer you to Microsoft documentation. So every time I got something wrong, I would go learn that topic through watching videos or reading Microsoft documentation or testing in my lab. So next up, I guess, my lab. So I built I enabled Hyper-V on my Windows 10 PC, and I used that to mimic, I guess, on-prem scenario, which had Active Directory, and I used another server to run AAD Connect, Azure File Syncing Services, and the MMA agents. That was quite handy. There are questions around AAD Connect and syncing methods and things like that. And basically, I actually used Terraform to build all the key components in Azure. So I built 2 hubs and 2 spokes, where I had VNets, log analytics workspaces, and then I just had spokes as sort of customer infrastructure, which had VMs and any other dependent services that I needed to test in the lab. Just some tips as well. So I was always reluctant to play in a lab because I was concerned about generating large bills. But it turns out it's actually not that expensive to run a lab. So you can see here, for the AZ-103, I actually ran a lab for 5 days. You can see the breakdown in costs. It cost me $5.94 to run in that period. So just be aware, of what you'll be charged for. An example is virtual machines are charged by time. So use, automatic shutdown or destroy them when you're not using them. So just turn them on, use them, turn them off. Log analytics, there's basically networking storage costs, but it's minimal if you're just collecting standard MMA logs like Windows events and performance data. Obviously, you're charged for network traffic, so don't go uploading, I guess, large files and things like that into your, virtual machines. VPN gateways are charged by time, so I basically just configured it and then destroyed it. Just wanted to see, I guess, how to configure it. I set up budget alerts. As you can see from my screenshot, I set it at $50. I think by the end of all my exams, I did the 300, 301 as well, and I think it's only like $15 in total. I use Terraform. I just found Terraform to be easier to build and destroy infrastructure. It's a bit more declarative as opposed to JSON. You sort of have to, analyze through lines and lines of parameters. As with Terraform, you basically just declare a resource and some parameters, and it's very straightforward. So I definitely recommend it. If you don't know Terraform, it's pretty easy to learn. Their getting started page is actually quite straightforward. So let's jump into the skills measured on the exam. Obviously, the AZ-103 was retired on August 31st. I actually did it on the 1st, so that's 31st in America. And it's been replaced by the AZ-104. So at the end of this, I'll follow up with some notes, I guess, on my thoughts around the differences. There's some key outliers. So the AZ-103 exam is across, I guess, five topics. So the first one is manage Azure subscriptions and resources, which is 15 to 20%. So basically, a key thing to know is the IAM controls or the RBAC controls. So know the difference between owner, contributor, specific contributor, i.e., network contributor, virtual machine contributor. Like an example is owner can assign access permissions to resources as where a contributor can't. So just know your roles. Know how to manage costs and billing. So I'm pretty sure if you're building a lab, you're going to be concerned about that anyway. So you can report on resources. You can use tagging. You can set up budgeting alerts. So be familiar with that interface. Know the basic constructs of an Azure policy, and also know like resource formats. There could be questions about even how to grant someone Microsoft support access. So just know, I guess, the formats and the structure of what's in a policy. Know the syntax, I guess, the commands to actually use the AZ role command to actually define and create, JSON files or JSON imported files. So just be familiar with that. The next topic is implement and manage storage, 15 to 20%. So storage accounts, I think, is probably a big topic. So it's always good to understand the differences between replication methods, what has access to what tiers. The key one is the archive tier, and understand, I guess, the actual replication methods, which is around like ZRS and GRS. They can sort of trick you out a little. So just be familiar with those. Understand use cases to migrate data. Use Storage Explorer to move small amounts. I think import export to use offline storage, to offline importing services, I guess. Understand Azure File Sync. So know how to set it up. Set up the agent. You've got to complete the registration, configure the server cloud endpoints. So I mimicked that by using my Hyper-V server and basically set up the agent and then used it to sync in the cloud. The next topic is deploy and manage virtual machines, which is 15 to 20%. So obviously basic management of virtual machines, know how to build one, know how to manage disk interfaces, things like that. Know SLAs for virtual machines. That's a big key one, which is, understand the SLAs around availability sets and, requiring managed disks as well as scale sets. Understand recovery service vaults and backup policies. So, know what you can and can't back up and know how to interpret or how to understand the policies itself. So understand the retentions is a big one. I think I might have had a question about that, about how long something would be stored, and then it had contradicting things about days. So it tries to fool you on days when you've got something for a whole year. So just read the questions carefully. Know the AZ commands and how to deploy ARM templates, and how to sort of repeat deployments. no network interfaces are, public and standard. So know that, a VM only needs one actual interface, but can have a private network address as well as a public. So a public doesn't actually require another interface. Also, a public interface doesn't actually show its IP address if the VM is off. So I didn't know that. I learned that through the study materials. Know what fault domains are and update domains, and also their limits. I think I actually had a question around that. So I've got 3 and 20 there. So, fault domains are pretty much how to separate your virtual machines across racks to prevent you from hardware and power failure, as where an update domain is sort of like grouping for how Microsoft manages maintenance on VMs. So just be aware of those. Know how to automate Linux deployments, so using Cloud Init and deprovisioning to generalize a VM. You might get questions around that. Log Analytics workspaces, I think there might have been 1 or 2 questions, so just know how to use a custo query, and also know what data you can capture, performance data, event logs, things like that. And be familiar with the MMA agent as well, which is the Microsoft Monitoring Agent, which is funny because we call it the MMA agent. But anyways, so data collected through diagnostic settings. So most services, PAS services, so RSV vaults and things like that, you can actually output diagnostics logs to a Log Analytics workspace. So just be familiar with that. And know how to set up CDN endpoints and their use cases. You might get questions on how to actually configure one. So the next topic is configure and manage virtual networks, 30 to 35%. So for anyone that's sort of starting in a job for Azure, you generally don't deal with this level of networking. Most things are already set up. So VPNs are generally set up, peering's already set up, and things like that. So it's kind of hard. So that was a bit of a gap for me, right? So that was why I built it in Azure. So understand the basic functions of a network security group, how you associate them, and understand policies. Understand the default Microsoft policies too. There's like the 6500 and 65,001. 65,000 and 65,001. The standard rules actually get deployed by default. VNet peering, understand that, address spaces can't overlap. Peering actually needs to happen, needs to be configured both ways for communication to go back and forth. Know Azure DNS, Azure Private DNS, registration networks, potential command lines and how to set it up. Understand the network watcher tools, NSG flow logs, connection monitor, IP flow verify, and things like that. You might get questions around that. Load balancers, you'll definitely get questions about load balancer. So understand the SKUs and the limitations. I think the basic one actually doesn't support SSL, and I think you can't actually assign VMs outside of an availability set. They have to be in an availability set. So the standard SKU is generally the common one to use. So it's kind of an easy question, but understand SLAs around that too. VPN and express routes and their requirements. So understand that, you need a subnet gateway for any sort of VPN, I believe. Local gateways as well, which is network. Well, it's actually the gateway to your on-prem network. SKUs between VPN gateways as well. There's different types of SKUs. I believe there's a free one which is actually not recommended. I can't remember what the limitations were, so that's an easy question. User-defined routes. I got a question around that. So understand route tables, I guess. How to configure them as well. I think the scenario was when you have a virtual machine acting as a virtual appliance that is operating as a virtual router in a way, and you need to forward all traffic incoming from on-prem to this virtual appliance. So know the options to configure that, and know the use cases for a key vault, and also understand the data plane versus the access plane. So there's actually two sets of permissions, so understand those two. And the use cases, which is potentially around managed identities, securely retrieving passwords. Managed identities, which is 15 to 20%. So understand, the IAM controls, so that sort of overlaps with the first topic. Know the basic MFA settings, not conditional access policies, but the actual settings that come with Azure AD by default. So you can actually configure things like trusted locations, I believe, and things like that. And also understand the license requirements around that. So SSPR, which is self-service password reset, actually requires a P1 license, and privileged identity management, which is PIM, requires a P2 license. So I understand the differences. You might get like cost and licensing questions around that. Understand Azure Active Directory domain join and device settings. That's always an interesting one, and also know how to limit the portal as well. So enforce MFA for portal access. That's probably a topic that will come up. Know the differences between password hash sync and password pass-through authentication. I used my Hyper-V on-prem environment to sync AAD up. Understand hash sync is storing passwords in the cloud and pass-through is not. It's basically redirecting back to on-prem. Know how to set up custom domains in Azure Active Directory. So someone else's cloud.com, I actually registered and configured it. So, using text records to validate custom domains. So know that. And know how the access you need to actually set up the AAD Connect services. I believe it's global admin for AAD and then enterprise admin for the on-prem AD. So just some tips along the way. Know the difference between SLAs, so 99.99 and 99.95, and that is a thing. They might try and stump you on that. So just know that. That's generally around load balancers and virtual machines. So scenario-based questions. So focus on the question first. Sometimes it's easier because Microsoft has a tendency to try and bamboozle you with a whole bunch of information that's actually irrelevant to the question, and it sort of overloads you. This is like too much. But then if you read the question and then you try and isolate the topic, you might find that to be easier rather than it overloading you, I guess. So focus on the question. If you get a scenario, it's probably easier. Or else you'll get too distracted on a whole bunch of information that you don't actually need to know. Focus on certain keywords such as, data center versus region failover. There might be questions around that. So just be aware of the differences because, that will determine, I guess, your storage replication type. So just be aware of those keywords. Big keyword is cost should be minimized. So that's generally the cheapest option that does the bare minimum. So when it says that, just go with, the objective is cost should be minimized. So just basically choose the easiest option or the cheapest option that meets the minimum requirement. And I guess with any exam, just trust your gut and go with your answers. I actually had, I think, maybe one or two questions where I didn't even know the answer. So I logically broke it down, try to make a rational guess, and then I would either just choose an option, move on, or I would mark it for review and come back and see if, my opinion has changed. But failing an exam is not the end of the world. So don't sit there and try and figure out an answer or stress over it for 30 minutes because that's just going to throw you off your whole game. So just trust your gut. If you're not prepared and you fail, you fail. You just give it another shot and just do your best. Fill those gaps and go. Just trust your gut. Exams are always tricky. They're always still stressful. But I mean, you can only do what you can do, so there's no point in stressing about it. That's really all I can say. So thoughts on the AZ-104 exam, which has replaced it. So I did all my exams, the 103, 300 and 301 before they retired. So I did them in a very short period of time. I just wanted to do it because I already had the course materials because it's been on the cards for a couple of years. So just under pressure, I just forced myself to do them. So it looks like there's just minor changes. So the topics that I mentioned would still apply, but obviously you should still, follow your own process, watch your own videos, read your own content. Take what I say as tips, not really something that you should go, oh, yep, okay, Sonny said this and I should go study this. So I'd recommend you still follow your own process. But I mean, this will sort of logically break it down and give you some rationale. So the big key things here that's changed is you can see the first one, which is manage Azure subscriptions and resources. And now it's sort of changed to manage Azure identities and governance. So that would indicate to me that would focus more around managed identities, potentially, policies, as well as user security potentially. So you might get some AZ-P2 type questions because that has sort of more functionality around identity protection. So it potentially revolves around that. But whatever course material you have should fill that gap. The other topics are sort of similar. So storage seems to be still on par, but you might get a little bit more content in that. I'm not sure. They would have updated some things. So this one's interesting. Deploy and manage virtual machines is now deploy and manage Azure compute resources. So my assumption is that would be virtual machines, potential app services, so web apps, could include like function apps as well. So it could be a whole bunch of things. So your course material should also cover the difference of that. Just going through and editing the video and something came to mind. Just make sure you cover Azure Container Registry and Azure Container Instances as well as Kubernetes services. Should be covered in your study materials, but I thought I'd throw that in. And the last one here is managed identities, which is been consolidated, I guess, in 104 to the first topic. And then they've included another one, which is monitor and backup Azure resources, which is quite interesting. So I assume there'll be more emphasis on data management, backup and recovery services, so as well as more in depth probably on backup agents as well, and potentially ASR, Azure Site Recovery. That is a guess. Again, follow your course materials. And that's pretty much all there is. So thanks for watching or listening if you're listening to it on a podcast. And if you're taking exams, so it's good luck with your exams. And I hope this has helped in some sort of way. Exams are, you just got to stay calm, logically break things down. Use the knowledge that you have gained, and basically just answer the questions. That's all it really is. There's no harm in failing. So just do your best, and that's all you can do really. And just fill the gaps if you do fail. It's not the end of the world. So this will be episode 1. So hopefully by this time, it will be on Apple iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, and Google Podcasts. And of course, it's going to be on YouTube. So I'm building out my website. So the website will include links to the video and the podcasts. So hopefully I'll have that done in the next week. And yeah, I've got more videos to come. So my next one will be the AZ-300 and then the AZ-301. And then in the future, I'm planning to do AZ-500 and the AZ-400 because they both correlate with what I do at work. So why not? And I'm going to do more videos around things I learn. So I might do a Terraform video, might talk about new features and functions, or just any sort of tips around things I've learned on how to configure things. So I want to play with Azure DevOps and play with pipelines a bit more. And yeah, so thanks for listening. And yeah, so hopefully that wasn't too awkward. That was my first podcast, episode 1. So signing out, and yeah, have a good day.